There's an unofficial map floating around California real estate circles that agents really don't want you to see. It shows every town where homes consistently sell for half their Zillow estimate or less. And when you look at the reasons why, a very uncomfortable pattern starts to emerge. 12 towns. 12 places where the number on the screen has almost nothing to do with what a buyer will actually pay. And the gap between fantasy and reality keeps getting wider every single month. We've got a town whose entire economy was weed until the state legalized it and crushed every grower overnight. A desert town that its own government called dying in an official report. A fire-scarred mountain village where 75% of the buildings are gone and the Zillow page still shows a price like nothing happened. And a lakeside community that ranks as one of the car theft capitals of America. If you're the kind of person who finds financial horror stories weirdly entertaining, go ahead and subscribe now, because this channel is basically built for you. Let's start the countdown. Number 12. Redding, Shasta County. Redding sits at the top of the Sacramento Valley where the dry heat pushes past 110 degrees in summer, and the surrounding hills turn gold and brittle by June. It is the kind of town that markets itself as a gateway to outdoor recreation, with Shasta Lake and Whiskeytown National Recreation Area within a short drive. The brochure version of Redding looks incredible. If you only looked at the tourism website, you would start packing tomorrow. The reality version is more complicated. As of early 2026, Shasta County home prices dropped 4.3% year over year to a median of about $370,000. Active listings climbed nearly 29%, and the county posted one of the 4 worst foreclosure rates in the entire state in June 2026. Homes are sitting on the market longer, sellers are cutting prices, and the gap between what Zillow thinks a house is worth and what someone will actually pay for it keeps widening. Redding still carries the scars of the 2018 car fire. That was the one that produced an actual fire tornado. A genuine documented vortex of flame that ripped through neighborhoods at over 140 miles per hour. It was classified as an EF3, the same rating given to serious tornadoes. Except this one was on fire. It killed 8 people and destroyed more than 1,600 structures. Insurance companies did not forget that. Buyers did not forget that either. And the algorithm? The algorithm forgot it almost immediately. Number 11. Ukiah, Mendocino County. Here's a fun fact. Ukiah is haiku spelled backwards. The town leans into this aggressively. There are poetry events, literary references, the whole thing. It is charming. Walk through downtown Ukiah and you will find art galleries, a craft brewery, and a farmer's market. On the surface, it feels like the kind of small California town people dream about retiring to. Here is a less fun fact. Zillow's own forecast projected Ukiah for the single steepest home value decline in the entire state of California. Negative 7.6% by April 2026. And the real numbers matched. Median sale prices dropped 9.82% year over year, and homes sat on the market for 125 days in December 2025, up from 105 the year before. Ukiah sits in the heart of Mendocino County, which is part of California's infamous Emerald Triangle. For decades, the Emerald Triangle was the cannabis capital of America. Growers in Mendocino, Humboldt, and Trinity counties built entire economies around illegal marijuana cultivation. The towns had restaurants because the growers ate there. They had mechanics because the growers drove trucks. They had real estate markets because the growers bought houses with cash. Then California legalized recreational weed in 2018, and the legal market crushed the small operators almost overnight. Statewide legal cannabis sales actually fell 8% to $5.3 billion in 2022, the first decline since legalization. The legal farms had scale and corporate backing. The small growers had dirt, sunlight, and a sudden pile of compliance paperwork they could not afford. The illegal operations collapsed, and the towns built on that money started collapsing with them. Ukiah is the poster child, the poetry town that ran on weed money. And no, I'm not making that up. Number 10. Willits, Mendocino County. 20 minutes north of Ukiah on Highway 101, Willits calls itself, the gateway to the Redwoods. It is home to the skunk train, a heritage railroad that winds through old-growth forests and over trestle bridges built in the 1880s. Tourists love it. They ride the train, take photos of the giant trees, buy a postcard, and leave. They do not buy houses. Home values dropped roughly 10% year over year, making it one of the steeper declines in the state. Same story as Ukiah, but Willits has an extra layer. It was a timber town first, then a cannabis town, and now it is a town trying to figure out what comes next when both of its economic identities have dried up, and the only thing left is a scenic train ride and a lot of empty houses. The Emerald Triangle contraction hit Willits particularly hard because the town is small enough that every closed grow operation rippled through the entire economy. The restaurant that served the growers loses customers. The hardware store that sold supplies loses revenue. The landlord who rented to workers loses tenants. And the houses those workers lived in? They sit empty, priced at whatever Zillow's algorithm last calculated, which was almost certainly higher than what anyone will pay today. What comes next on this list makes Willits look stable. Pay attention to this next detail because it explains a pattern you will see repeated 5 more times before we are done. Number 9. Eureka, Humboldt County. Eureka is gorgeous. It is a Victorian seaport town on the north coast with ornate painted ladies, a working waterfront, and fog rolling in off Humboldt Bay like a movie set. The Carson Mansion, a massive Victorian masterpiece built in 1886 by a lumber baron, sits on a hill overlooking the town like something out of a Gothic novel. Drive through the Old Town Eureka and you will genuinely consider moving there for about 15 minutes. Then you check the numbers. Zillow forecast Eureka to decline 6.3%, and the city holds the highest count of foreclosure, pre-foreclosure, and auction properties in all of Humboldt County. The typical home value sits around $415,534 and is sliding. Property crime runs at roughly 3.17%, which means for every 100 residents, more than 3 will experience some form of property crime in a given year. Eureka is the largest town in the Emerald Triangle and the epicenter of the post-legalization economic hangover. This is the place where the weed economy was not some backwoods secret. It was the economy. Dispensaries lined the streets. Trimming season brought temporary workers from across the state who rented apartments and spent money at local bars. The entire regional culture revolved around cultivation, harvest, and distribution. When legalization brought corporate competition and tax burdens that small growers could not absorb, the trimmers stopped coming. The supply stores closed. The restaurants that depended on that seasonal rush started shutting down one by one. The Victorian houses are still beautiful, though. That part is real, which, looking back, makes the whole thing either incredibly tragic or a future investor's dream, depending on how you look at it. Now, the next 4 towns on this list are a different breed entirely. We are leaving the weed belt behind and entering something darker. Number 8, Truckee, Nevada County. Now we shift from towns that were always affordable to a town that absolutely was not. Truckee is mountain money. It sits near Lake Tahoe at over 5,800 feet elevation, surrounded by ski resorts and the kind of alpine scenery that ends up on screensavers. During the pandemic, remote workers from San Francisco flooded in with Bay Area salaries. They drove prices past $1 million and turned Truckee into one of the hottest housing markets in the country. That boom is over. Zillow forecasts Truckee to decline 3.6%, and on $1 million home, that is $36,000. But the bigger story is not the percentage. It is the insurance. The California insurance crisis is hammering mountain communities harder than anywhere else. Fire risk models have turned towns like Truckee into insurance nightmares. Carriers are dropping policies. Premiums are doubling and tripling. The Tahoe Donner Homeowners Association had to purchase a first-of-its-kind $2.5 million parametric wildfire resilience policy just to keep coverage in place for its community. That is an HOA paying $2.5 million for a special experimental insurance product that barely existed a few years ago. If you're wondering how that is even legal, so is everyone else. When you cannot insure $1 million home at a reasonable rate, you cannot sell it at $1 million. The Zestimate does not know this. The Zestimate is staring at last year's comparable sales and confidently displaying a number that no insurance company on earth will underwrite. The remote workers who arrived in 2020 are leaving. The insurance companies who covered them are leaving faster, and the prices are following both of them out the door. Number 7. Clear Lake, Lake County. Clear Lake is the town that sounds too depressing to be real and then turns out to be worse than you imagined. The median home value sits around $204,857. Median household income is about $41,867. On paper, that is one of the most affordable lakeside communities in the entire state of California. On paper, this should be a retirement paradise. In practice, not so much. In reality, Clear Lake has one of the highest motor vehicle theft rates in the nation. Your odds of having your car stolen in any given year land somewhere around 1 in 165 to 1 in 217, depending on which data set you use. The schools are rated F. Lake County posted one of the worst foreclosure rates in California in June 2026. The county seat is filled with boarded-up businesses and houses sitting vacant with broken windows and overgrown yards. And then there is the lake itself. Clear Lake is the oldest lake in North America. It has existed for approximately 2.5 million years, and it would be one of the most beautiful natural landmarks in the western United States if it were not chronically plagued by toxic algae blooms and mercury contamination from the abandoned Sulphur Bank mercury mine. The mine operated from the 1870s through the 1950s and left behind enough mercury in the sediment to turn the entire lake into an EPA Superfund site. The algae blooms turn the water bright green in summer, and most locals will tell you not to let your dog anywhere near it. So to recap, affordable lakefront property on a poisoned 2.5 million-year-old Superfund lake in the car theft capital of rural California with F-rated schools. And homes are still selling below their Zillow estimate. That is the kind of number that makes accountants cry. Number 6. Susanville, Lassen County. This is where the list starts getting genuinely dark and genuinely strange. Susanville is a town of about 8,000 people in the high desert of northeastern California. It is remote in a way that most Americans cannot imagine. The nearest major city is Reno, over 80 miles away across the Nevada border, and the landscape is sagebrush and juniper as far as the eye can see. For decades, Susanville's economy ran on one thing: the California Correctional Center, a state prison where guards and administrators earned over $90,000 a year in an area where the median household income was a fraction of that. The prison was not just the biggest employer, it was the reason the town existed in its modern form. The grocery stores, the schools, the housing market, all of it depended on prison paychecks. When California announced the prison was closing, Susanville did something remarkable. The town sued the governor. The city filed a lawsuit, won a temporary restraining order, and fought the closure all the way through the courts. For a brief moment, it looked like it might actually work. Then the state legislature passed a law exempting prison closures from environmental review, basically rewriting the rules mid-game. The prison closed in 2023. Families packed their trucks and left for transfers at other facilities across the state. Local officials warned publicly that property values would take a turn in the opposite direction. Homes hit the market immediately. Lassen County posted its 8th straight year of population loss in 2025. Zillow forecast: Susanville to decline another 3.7%. The town that begged to keep its prison is now a town without one, watching its home values fall while the algorithm pretends everything is fine. If you are watching this and finding it useful or horrifying or some weird combination of both, hit that subscribe button because we cover stories like this every single week. And this next town is even wilder. Number 5. Blythe, Riverside County. Most towns try to hide their problems. Blythe's problems were published in an official county document. In 2022, the Riverside County Grand Jury released a report with this title: "The City of Blythe is Dying." That is not a metaphor someone came up with for a YouTube video. That is the actual title of an actual government report about an actual city where real people live and pay taxes and send their kids to school. Blythe sits in the far eastern corner of California along the Colorado River, surrounded by desert that stretches flat and empty in every direction. The drive from Los Angeles takes about 3.5 hours, most of it through heat-blasted wasteland. The town has a main street with a few surviving businesses and residential blocks where the homes are small, sun-bleached, and frequently listed for sale. The median home price is about $219,528. Compare that to Norco, another Riverside County city with a prison, where homes go for $775,089. Same county, 4 times the price. Chuckawalla Valley. State Prison, Blythe's second largest employer with roughly 800 jobs and 2,000 inmates, closed on November 1st, 2024. That prison also made headlines in 2020 when a COVID outbreak infected nearly 1,000 people inside the facility. The city ranks 9th on California's Distressed Cities Index, and 22.4% of residents live below the poverty line. It routinely hits 115 degrees in summer, and the nearest major hospital is over an hour away. An economic report estimated Blythe would need roughly $25 million in outside investment just to become sustainable. $25 million to keep a city alive? And its own county called it dying. Meanwhile, Zillow is still displaying home values in Blythe as if the town has a future that the town's own government is not sure about. And no, I'm not making that up either. Number 4, Paradise, Butte County. On November 8th, 2018, the Camp Fire swept through Paradise, California, and killed 85 people. It destroyed nearly 19,000 structures and caused $16.5 billion in damage. Entire neighborhoods were erased in hours. Families drove through walls of flame on the only 2 major evacuation routes, with traffic backed up for miles, while the fire moved faster than the cars. It was the deadliest and most destructive wildfire in California history. Home prices in the 959-69 zip code dropped from roughly $600,000 to $300,000. Half. Gone. But the story of Paradise is not just a story of decline. It is also somehow a story of growth. After the fire, Paradise became the fastest growing town in California by percentage. Population climbed 16.1% in 2023. New homes went up, built to stricter fire codes with cement siding and metal roofs. Families returned. The town that burned down was coming back. But, and this is the part that makes Paradise so painfully complicated, only about 40% of the original pre-fire residents actually returned. The population sits around 10,691, down from roughly 26,000 before the fire. The people who came back found new construction priced at a premium, around $450,000 for fresh builds on streets where the neighbors' lots were still empty. Longtime locals who lost everything in the fire discovered they had been priced out of the reconstruction of their own town. Their insurance payouts were not enough to cover rebuilding costs under new fire codes, and developers were marketing the new homes to buyers from Sacramento and the Bay Area. Paradise is simultaneously the best and worst real estate story in California. It is a comeback story where the main characters got replaced by understudies. The Zestimate on a Paradise home could mean a brand new house on a street that is 60% empty lots. It could mean a teardown with a view of what used to be a school. The number means nothing without the context, and the algorithm does not do context. This decision to rebuild seemed small at the time. It wasn't. And neither was what happened one county to the north. Number 3. Greenville, Plumas County. If Paradise is a story about what happens after a fire, Greenville is a story about what happens when the after never really arrives. The Dixie Fire tore through Greenville in August 2021 and destroyed over 75% of the structures in town. The Village Drug Company, which had been serving the community since 1860, burned to the ground along with the post office, the church, the bar, and block after block of homes. One local reporter described Greenville as my defiantly quirky, beautiful, adopted hometown turned into a ghost town. She was not being dramatic. The population fell from roughly 1,000 to about 200. Years after the fire, only an estimated 35 to 45 homes have been rebuilt. Streets that once had houses on them now have charred concrete pads with weeds growing through the cracks and the occasional chimney standing alone against the tree line. The school is gone. The library is gone. The gas station is gone. What remains is a handful of rebuilt homes surrounded by the outlines of everything that used to be there. Greenville was already struggling before it burned. The poverty rate was more than double the state average, and the population had been shrinking for years. This was not Truckee. This was not a mountain resort that could rebuild with ski lodge money. This was a gold rush town that had been slowly declining for decades and then got hit with a fire that took almost everything. And the Zillow page? The estimates for Greenville properties still reflect a town that functionally no longer exists. The algorithm sees a parcel, checks for comps, finds almost nothing, and spits out a number based on regional averages that have nothing to do with a place where 3/4 of the buildings are ash. If you have ever wondered why people say Zillow is broken, Greenville is the proof. The estimate has the confidence of a fact. The town has the reality of a ruin. Number 2, Weaverville and Trinity County. Trinity County is the purest distillation of everything wrong on this list. It has no incorporated cities, not one. The population hovers around 16,000 people scattered across 3,000 square miles of mountain wilderness. The median household income sits near $42,000. The nearest Walmart is over an hour away, and the real estate market just fell off a cliff. The median sale price across the county dropped to about $253,250 in November 2025. That is a decline of 17.9% year over year. Price per square foot fell 20.9%. Homes sold for roughly 9% below their list price. Those numbers are not corrections. Those are free falls. The reason is simple and devastating. Trinity County is part of the Emerald Triangle, and outside of the Trinity Alps wilderness, there was essentially no economy beyond cannabis. You already know what legalization did to Ukiah, Willits, and Eureka. Trinity County got it worse because there was even less to fall back on. No tourism infrastructure, no coastal charm, no Victorian houses for Instagram, just mountains, weed, and the supply chain that weed built. When that collapsed, everything went with it. Cal Matters reported that the nearby Hayfork grocery store saw revenue drop an estimated 20% as the weed economy dried up. And some growers are not just closing their operations, they are literally abandoning properties, walking away from homes and land and greenhouses because the economics no longer work. Nobody is buying. And holding the property means paying taxes on something worth less every month. Weaverville, the county seat, is a beautiful town with Gold Rush architecture and a Joss House State Historic Park that preserves a Taoist temple built by the Chinese miners who helped build the region in the 1800s. Tourists pass through on the way to the Trinity Alps every summer. But the housing market is cratering so fast that month-to-month median figures swing wildly on tiny sales volume. One month might show a 20% decline, the next shows a 33% increase, all because 2 or 3 sales happen to close at different price points. It is nearly impossible for any algorithm to keep up with a market that has the statistical stability of a coin flip. If Greenville is a ghost town because of fire, Trinity County is becoming a ghost town because of economics. And both are happening in real time while Zillow displays prices from a world that no longer exists. Number 1. Bombay Beach, Imperial County. This is the one. The town that sounds like fiction and turns out to be stranger than anything a writer could invent. Bombay Beach sits on the eastern shore of the Salton Sea in the far southeastern corner of California, and it is unlike any other place in America. The town sits 223 feet below sea level, making it the lowest elevation community in the entire United States. It was once called the beach town of Southern California. In the 1950s and 1960s, people drove out from Los Angeles and Palm Springs to water ski on the Salton Sea, which was then marketed as the California Riviera. There were yacht clubs with white tablecloths. There were motor lodges with neon signs. There were families building vacation homes on what they thought was the next great California destination. Frank Sinatra performed at a resort nearby. The Beach Boys visited. For a brief window of time, Bombay Beach was glamorous. Then the Salton Sea started dying. The sea, which was actually an accident created by an irrigation canal breach in 1905, has no natural outlet. Water flows in from agricultural runoff, but only leaves through evaporation, which concentrates salt, pesticide residue, and agricultural chemicals year after year. By the 1970s, fish started dying in massive numbers. Tilapia carcasses piled up along the shoreline in drifts so thick they looked like gravel from a distance. The smell of hydrogen sulfide, which is the same gas that makes rotten eggs smell the way they do, began drifting across the shore towns for months at a time. The yacht clubs closed, the resorts shuttered. Tourism evaporated along with the waterline, which has been receding for decades, exposing dry lake bed that kicks up toxic dust clouds containing cadmium, chromium, and arsenic. Bombay Beach's population collapsed from 991 in 1990 to 231 by the 2020 census. Residents abandoned their homes with their furniture and possessions still inside. If you drive through Bombay Beach today, you will see living rooms open to the sky where the roof caved in, rusted cars half buried in sand, and trailers that have not been occupied in decades, sitting in rows like tombstones. Fishing was banned in the 1980s because the toxicity levels were too high to eat anything caught in the water. And here is the twist that makes Bombay Beach the most fascinating place on this entire list. It became an art colony. The Bombay Beach Biennale, an art festival that started in 2016, transformed the ruins into an outdoor gallery. Artists built installations in the abandoned buildings. A grand piano was placed on the cracked earth near the receding shoreline. Sculptures made from rusted metal and driftwood rose out of the empty lots. Somebody built a tiny drive-in movie theater facing the desert. The decay itself became the attraction. People now visit Bombay Beach specifically to photograph the apocalypse, and there is something both beautiful and profoundly unsettling about that. Land that was practically free a decade ago now lists around $20,000. Vacant desert parcels near the neighboring community of Nyland, which sits next to the famous Slab City, an off-grid squatter settlement on an abandoned marine base, go for $34,000 to $75,000. There is no grocery store in Bombay Beach. The nearest gas station is 20 miles away. The median household income in the surrounding area is among the lowest in the state. And the Zillow estimates on Bombay Beach properties exist in a kind of quantum state where the number on screen could represent a habitable structure, an art installation, a collapsed trailer, or an empty lot next to a toxic lake that smells like sulfur 6 months out of the year. It is the most extreme version of the gap between estimate and reality on this entire list. The algorithm says one thing, the Salton Sea says another, and the Salton Sea has been winning that argument for 50 years. So, what does all of this actually mean? The real question is not whether these towns are good deals. Some of them might be, honestly, for the right buyer with the right risk tolerance, and a very flexible definition of the word amenities. A house near Clear Lake for under $200,000 could work for someone who does not mind the algae and has a strong car alarm. A lot in Trinity County for pocket change could be a steal if you believe legal cannabis will eventually create a stable economy. Truckee might just be experiencing a temporary cooling that makes it accessible for the first time in years. But the bigger question, the one that actually matters, is what all of this tells us about the tools we use to understand housing in this country. Zillow's Zestimate was never designed for towns where the economy runs on an illegal crop, or where 75% of the buildings burned down, or where the nearest gas station is a 20-mile drive through desert that sits below sea level. It was designed for suburbs with frequent sales and cookie-cutter floor plans, where every house on the block is roughly the same size and sold within the last 18 months. When you take that tool and point it at Bombay Beach or Greenville or Trinity County, you get a number that has the confidence of a fact and the accuracy of a horoscope. 2.8 million insurance non-renewals. Prison closures gutting rural economies overnight. Entire agricultural regions collapsing under legalization. Wildfires erasing towns faster than they can rebuild. A toxic lake that killed a resort town and turned it into an art exhibit. These are not glitches in the California housing market. They are the California housing market, at least in the places nobody puts on the brochure. If you made it this far, you are clearly the kind of person who appreciates a deep dive into the weird, dark corners of American real estate. Subscribe and hit the like button so we can keep making these, because next week we are looking at the states where your dollar stretches the farthest in 2026, and some of the answers are going to surprise you. And if you ever find yourself checking a Zillow estimate on a home in rural California, do yourself a favor. Drive there first. Talk to someone who lives there. Look at the lake. Smell the air. Check if the gas station is open. What you find might be a hidden gem. Or it might be a burned foundation next to a poisoned lake with no gas station for 20 miles and an art installation where the living room used to be. Either way, at least you will know what the number actually means.